But if you pay them more, that will drive up inflation. For all his flaws, i.e., racism and so on and so on, back in the days, Henry Ford was a genius. And he understood something that I don't know why more of us don't see it as just obvious. In America, our national minimum wage, in parts of the country, mostly in the Northeast and places similar in terms of views in politics, is higher. But for most of the country, the national minimum wage standard is $7.25 an hour. Now, I don't know about you, but there's nowhere in America, even in the poorest counties, even the most rural, you know, there's nowhere in America where you can be a self respecting adult supporting yourself, let alone a family, on that amount of money. Even if you had two earners making $7.25 an hour, you're going to have to find other forms of assistance, i.e., food stamps, SNAP. Your children are going to benefit from SNAP because you don't make enough to feed them. Henry Ford, he understood something very simply. He was one of the first that really started paying his workers, his factory workers, a working wage. Meaning the common worker, the goal was for the common worker putting together the Ford Model Ts. He wanted it so that they could afford a car too. So like how MLMs today, sometimes the salesperson is the biggest customer of the business. He wanted to make sure that the people working on the factory floor could themselves one day afford a car. And I think that's the way we should approach our debate about the minimum wage. People say if you raise the minimum wage, it'll cause inflation, it'll do this, it'll do that. Look, I always say when considering complicated debates, start from the position is what do you think is the best and most honest way to move forward, and let's see how we can find compromise around that. I'm not going to try to find compromise on what I think or what you think. Let's try to find agreement on what we think is the best and the most honest way forward, and then let's figure out how we can impose our ideas and our thoughts to make that goal a reality. And if we want a society, which I'm always saying, I want to live in a society. I don't want to live in a place where as I get off the highway or as I get off the turnpike, there are people with signs saying we'll work for food. That to me is not the society I want to live in. I would prefer to live in a society where when I come in through the gates in my community, or when you come in through when you lock your door at night, where you're not worried about a desperate, hungry person kicking in your door because there's not enough to go around. We have enough to go around in our society. We produce enough in our society to make sure that all of us are taken care of correctly, where everyone can have the pride and the dignity that comes along with being able to support themselves. Sometimes I hear people say, the man's greatest dignity or a great man's greatest honor is putting in a hard day's work. That's baloney. If you put in a hard day's work and you cannot feed yourself without food stamps or this and that, you're not a dignified person. You're just someone working and trying your best, just barely keeping your head above water. And that's not the society I want to live in. I'd rather the national federal minimum wage be $22 an hour, and instead of $5, I pay $7 for a Big Mac, but everyone working there will have an opportunity to afford what I can afford, my basics. In most parts of the world, McDonald's workers earn the equivalent of 20 or more dollars an hour. Yes, McDonald's workers in Scandinavia, McDonald's workers in Norway, I think they earn $22 an hour. McDonald's workers, that's their minimum wage over there. Okay, and they're not falling apart at the seams. They're not. No one is waiting on lines for medical care. There's no hyper and runaway inflation. That's not the way that works. Look, back in the days, I was working at a place where our jobs were getting outsourced. Maybe 20 years ago, I was working at a call center, and our jobs were getting outsourced to a factory, to a company in Asia. And everyone's like, man, those people they'll do this, they're taking on jobs. Like, no, no, no. You are not willing to pay $3 a month more for your cable bill, so they found someone else that worked for less and earn a decent wage by their standards. If we want a society, we have to pay for it, okay? If that means minimum wage is $22 an hour, whatever it is that they want to make it, whatever the graph says we need to get to. But yes, I have to pay a couple bucks more for regular services. I think I can live with that if that meant living in a society that I could be proud of.